We are wrapping up the last page of our day one of exponential functions notes, and on the back side we are going to be looking again at transformation. So what I've done here on 1 through 6 is I've gone ahead and made my table, listed out A through F, and I've drawn a graph so we can plot our transformations in our initial functions. So again, we're making a table with our values -3 to +3, and then we're going to answer these questions for each. We're going to describe the transformation, state our domain, our range, if it's increasing or decreasing, where the y-intercept is, and our horizontal asymptote. So again, we are going to be using our calculator for the table functions. So starting here with number 1, we have 2 to the x power. So that is going to go into 2 to the x power, and then in my table I'm going to be typing in my values that we are looking at and fill in our table. Now this is one we have already done on the front page at the very beginning, so answering these questions and plotting this should be fairly easy. So there are my values starting with A. We actually are not going to have a transformation because this is our parent function that we are going to be referencing for the rest of 2 through 6. So we have no transformations, but our domain. Our domain is, as we said in the first one, it's all real numbers. Our range is all positive values. It is increasing. If I look at my y values, they are getting bigger, so it's an increasing function. Our y-intercept when x is 0 is at 0, 1, and horizontal asymptote. So the value it's going to be getting really, really close to is 0. So y equals 0 is going to be that horizontal asymptote. So here is 0, 1. It's going to be getting small and going off to positive infinity. So there's a rough sketch of our graph for 2 to the x. So that's our reference point. That's going to be our parent function. If we move on to number 2 now, here I've got 2 to the x minus 3 power. So I'm going to type that into my y1, go back to my table, and fill in our new values. And we are going to be analyzing what this does to our graph, how it transforms it. So filling this in here, got a bunch of tiny numbers now. Okay, so if we don't recognize a transformation right away, that's okay. Let's talk about what we know. So our domain. Our domain is still all real numbers. There's nothing that x cannot be. And our range is still going to be producing all positive numbers. So that's still going to be 0 to infinity. Increasing or decreasing. These numbers are getting bigger, so it's still an increasing function. Our y-intercept when x is 0, this has changed. This is now 0 and 0.0125. Or I think that's supposed to be 0.125. I apologize. I added an extra 0 in there. It should be 0.125 and 0.125. I apologize. I added that extra 0. All right, and then our horizontal asymptote. It's still going to be at y equals 0 because we're just getting really small numbers that are close to 0 but don't quite touch. So again, let's plot this and see what we're looking at here. Our y-intercept is going to be smaller than 1 this time, and I now have the 0.31. So this point y value of 0.125 still existed in our parent function at -3, and now it is this at 0. And our y function initially 1 was at 0, and now it's at 3. So what we're seeing here is actually a horizontal shift to the right 3 units. So we are shifting right 3 units. So that is our transformation there. Okay. Let's look on at number 3. Now I've got 2 to the x power minus 3. So 3 is not in the exponent. It is outside. And if you recall from, I don't mean to graph that. If you recall from when we did transformations in the fall, you might already have a good idea of what this is going to look like. So there's my table. I'm going to go ahead and fill it in for number 3, if this will focus. So if you already recognize that this is actually a vertical shift down 3 units, you would be correct. When it's outside, we are shifting down 3. So our domain has not changed, but our range has. Our range is now going to be from -3 to positive infinity, borderlining -3 and just getting bigger and bigger. It's still increasing. These y values are getting bigger. Our y-intercept, when x is 0, is now 0, -2. And we're going to have our horizontal asymptote now be at -3 because that is the minimum y value that it's going to get really close to but never quite touch. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that. There's my asymptote for reference. We're getting close to it, touching at -2, and then going off to positive infinity. Number 4, -2 to the x power. So -2 to the x power, again, making sure you're using the negative and not the minus. So I'm going to fill in those values. And what are we noticing here? Suddenly, we have all these negative y values. So what does that mean as a transformation? That means we have flipped across the x-axis. So our domain is still the same. Our domain has not changed, but our range has. We are going to have now all negative y values. So that range is going to be from -infinity to 0. Our y values are getting smaller, so this is now a decreasing function. Our y-intercept is at 0, -1. And our horizontal asymptote is still going to be at 0 because that is going to be where our function gets really close to but never quite touches. So there's 0, -1, so it's going to be really close to that x-axis and then go off to -infinity. Super close to being done. Number 5 here. Again, this is one that we should be kind of familiar with because we saw it previously in the notes. So here we are looking at, if my camera will focus, 2 to the -x power. Come on. Focus. Come on. Okay, 2 to the -x. Go to your table, and we're going to fill in those values once again. So we should already know what this transformation is because we identified it earlier in the notes. This is going to be a reflection on the y-axis. Our domain is all real numbers. Our range is all positive numbers. This is a decreasing function. Our y values are getting smaller. When x is 0, our y-intercept is 1, and we still have that same horizontal asymptote. So it's going to be crossing at my intercept and getting smaller and smaller. All right, last one. This time we are going to have 2 transformations. If you can go ahead and give a guess as to what they are. We are going to have 2 plus 2 to the -x. So in our table, fill in those values. Not -3. That's +3. I apologize. +3. Oh, sorry. I'm losing track here. 0, 3, 2.5, 2.25. There we go. Okay. So, again, if you don't recognize the transformations right away, that's okay. Let's talk about what has changed. Our domain is still all real numbers. That's not changing. Our range, however, is going to be getting larger. Our range is now going to be from 2 to positive infinity because, if you guessed it, that is actually a vertical shift. So that is going to be shifting up 2. D. Our y values are getting smaller, so this is decreasing, which should indicate that we flipped on the y-axis. And then our y-intercept is now at 0,3 because of that shift up. And then our horizontal asymptote is going to be in a reference to that shift, so it's going to be at y equals 2. So there's 1, 2, 3. Again, we're getting bigger, going smaller. And there's that horizontal asymptote for reference. And that is what our transformed function would look like more or less. And that wraps up our notes on day 1.